It is Tuesday. Today, January 13th. It's also the 24th of Tebet. And we'll be discussing a real pain.
Oh, good afternoon. Welcome to those who are here in the room, those who are watching from home. This is a bit of an experiment. We haven't tried doing this as a hybrid before. You know, some of you have been with me for, do you need the microphone? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Is that going to be too loud for you or? Okay. So a bit of an experiment to try this as a hybrid and see how it goes. We'll give it these 6 weeks of classes to see, and then figure out what happens next. But it's a real pleasure to see you here and to see those online as well. And we're going to be discussing this movie, A Real Pain, from last year. For those of you, and I know many of you have been along for this whole ride going all the way back to COVID, where we've watched now something like, I don't know, probably close to 30 movies that we've watched together and talked about. Most of them have been considerably older than this one, right? We've went back to the real classics, you know, going back to the 1940s and onward. But I think this certainly fits in the category of real Jewish classics. This is probably one of the most recent movies to be added to that canon, I'd say. So it was nominated for a couple of Oscars last year, one for Best Screenplay and the other for Best Supporting Actor. It didn't win the Screenplay Award, but it did win for Best Supporting Actor for Kieran Culkin, who won every award last year for this movie, actually, every critics award and all kinds of things. It was pretty much a clean sweep for him. So it's actually, but the other actor in it, Jesse Eisenberg, is the one who wrote it and directed it, as well as starring in it. And so a real multi-talent. And I want to talk about him for a moment. In addition to getting this Oscar nomination last year for writing the screenplay, he has been nominated for an Oscar in the past for acting. He was nominated for the movie The Social Network, where he plays Mark Zuckerberg from 2010, I think. He had his breakthrough. I mean, he did a few really small things in the early 2000s. In 2005, he was in a movie called The Squid and the Whale, which is probably what sort of really broke him into the business, and he started getting good work after that. In 2009, he was in a couple of movies that I actually like both of them very much, Adventureland and Zombieland. Two very different movies, but Adventureland was about young people working at like a water park, and Zombieland was about what it sounds like. You know, it was a zombie horror movie where he plays one of the heroes. And so he doesn't always play this kind of meek character that he plays in this movie. In fact, there's a movie called American Ultra where he plays, you know, a government-trained assassin. It's a very, you know, it's a very entertaining action movie, and he holds up that part remarkably well, say. But he's better known for these kinds of characters. Even as Zuckerberg in The Social Network, you know, kind of socially awkward, you know, with some various kinds of tics and things like that. He plays that very well. Apparently, it is kind of close to home for him. I think he does suffer from anxiety, and so you see it, TV. But he's also been he plays a magician in the Now You See Me, Now You Don't movies, the third one of which came out this year. And he actually played Lex Luthor, Superman's arch rival, in the Batman Superman movie a number of years ago, and a couple of other DC Universe things. So he's been in a couple of Woody Allen movies, which makes a lot of sense, I think. You know, Woody Allen doesn't get so much play in the United States anymore, but he was in a movie called Cafe Society, where he's sort of the Woody Allen stand-in, because in most Woody Allen movies, there's someone portraying Woody Allen these days. And he was in a TV miniseries that was very well received a few years ago of a terrific book called Fleischman is in Trouble. And if you get a chance, I invite you to look that up as well. He also played Marcel Marceau. You remember the mime, Marcel Marceau, the French mime, who actually fought in the French resistance back in World War II. So in a movie called Resistance, you'll find Jesse Eisenberg playing Marcel Marceau. And and if you want a real oddity, I'm very fond of this movie, but I don't know that anybody else who's seen it. It's called Sasquatch Sunset. It's a near silent movie about the lives of a family of Sasquatches, and he plays one of them. And it's a very interesting piece of work, actually. But no, I can't heartily recommend it, but it's a very small, offbeat, crazy kind of film. But he's also he writes not just this screenplay. I mean, he's written 3 plays that have been produced in New York. His writing has appeared in the New Yorker. Um, he had a book of short stories published about 10 years ago. He was born in Astoria, Queens in 1983 into a Jewish family of Polish descent. So I think this film, while not exactly autobiographical, I mean, certainly has some elements of his own background and family in it. He studied at the New School and then in New York, and then eventually did a master's program at the University of Indiana. So he has a little bit of Midwestern roots that we can connect with. So, so that's Jesse Eisenberg. His co-star in the movie, Kieran Culkin, is the brother of Macaulay Culkin, of course, who was the star of Home Alone when he was a little boy. And that was actually Kieran Culkin's first appearance in a movie as well. He plays the cousin who wets the bed, actually, in that movie. He was born in 1982. He's probably best known still, if not for this movie where he won all the acting awards, then for the TV series Succession in the last several years, where he plays kind of an unhinged character, Roman Roy, and he won an Emmy for that as well. So as for going back to like 2002, and he was a teenager, he was in some movies. There's a movie called Igby Goes Down, for which he got a Golden Globe nomination, which is a pretty entertaining sort of a 2000s version of The Graduate, kind of a young man unsure of what direction to turn in life. Right? I saw him in New York City last year in the Broadway revival of Glengarry Glen Ross. So he was in that with some pretty high-powered acting talent around him as well. So an actor to be contended with, I think. We'll hear his name for a long time, I expect. There's not many other people in this film who you might have recognized. You may have noticed Jennifer Grey, who we saw, a number of go rounds ago when we watched Dirty Dancing. So she's the star of Dirty Dancing. So in this movie, she plays Marcia, the divorced woman who's on the trip with them. And so she's, I'm sure, best known for that. She was a Golden Globe nominee for that. And she was also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you ever enjoyed watching that comedy, she plays Ferris's sister, the one who always gets in trouble when Ferris never seems to get in trouble. And she's the daughter of Joel Grey, who we've seen in Cabaret, of course, and the granddaughter of Mickey Katz. I don't know if anybody remembers Mickey Katz these days. Yeah, and I see Neil waving his hands there. Yeah, you remember him too. Yiddish American comedian, famed for song parodies and things like that. Borscht Riders in the Sky, and some very funny songs over the days. So, but she's carved out a career of as a character actress, and has a short but memorable kind of role in this movie, I think, as well. So I like this movie a lot. I think we could start with talking about it, the name of the movie, A Real Pain, because it works on several different levels. You may have noticed how the title of the movie appears in the movie. And if you didn't, I'll call it to your attention, right? The opening scene is in JFK Airport. The closing scene is also in JFK Airport. You have the Kieran Culkin character Benji sitting on a chair in JFK Airport, and right next to his head comes up the credit, says A Real Pain, right? And then at the end of the movie, the very same thing happens. He's sitting there in the chair, and on the other side of his head, it appears A Real Pain. So I think that the title works on multiple levels in the sense that if not to everybody on the trip that he's on, certainly to his cousin, Benji is a real pain, a real pain in the neck, whatever you want to say. But of course, it also refers to a different kind of pain. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, but I agree with you, Rick.
Oh, you know what? I think you need to talk on this so that people.
Sarah. If you were alluding to the fact that the Kieran Culkin character is the real thing,
Mhm.
I certainly felt that through the whole movie. And I kept thinking that just the Jesse Eisenberg character was a wimp.
Yeah.
That he wouldn't stand up to him no matter what. And I found that rather frustrating.
Yeah.
I kept shouting at him, saying, do something.
Yeah, I think that, it's certainly one way to interpret the title, and he is a thorn in everybody's side, right? And in that sense, he is certainly a real pain, right? And many of us would prefer, to not have to deal with life in that way. But on the other hand, he's also the guy who does shake things up and wake things up, regularly. So I think it's not, he's not just a negative character in this, right? There's more to it than that. But he is a real pain, and certainly to his cousin, and in some ways to everybody else in the movie, he makes them confront their real pain at various times in the movie too, right? So it works on that level. And then, of course, the whole thing, there's, a real pain means that even though we are generations away now from the Shoah, from the Holocaust, there is still a real pain that is in Jewish hearts, right? So these two young men, neither of whom exhibits much in the way of particular Jewishness. They make clear that they're Jewish, but they're not praying, they're not doing anything overtly Jewish in a certain way. And yet just the experience of being the grandchildren of a survivor, has given them a real pain, right? That they can't quite shake, right? So I think that's works on multiple levels, right? So I think the title of the movie itself gives you an insight, of course, into everything that goes on in here, and we there's a couple of scenes and lines that really stand out. There's the scene that I think really the pivotal scene in the movie is the scene in the restaurant where they come in and the pianist is playing Hava Nagila, and the group gets to talking, and the character played by Jesse Eisenberg, right? Ben, right? He's David. I'm sorry, David. Has these lines in that scene. When Benji leaves the table, and one of the other people on the tour says he's clearly in pain about him, and David's reaction is, look what happened to our families. Look where we came from. Who isn't wrought, right? That says the theme of the movie in some ways as clearly as anything in it, I think. And then he talks about his own pain, and he tells the people around the table, he hasn't been the kind of person like Benji to wear it on his sleeve, right? He says, I take a pill for my OCD, I jog and I meditate and I go to work in the morning and I come home at the end of the day and I move forward, because I know that my pain is unexceptional. So I don't feel the need to burden everybody with it. So, but, still in that moment, he's really expressing the pain that he feels inside. So I think, those lines alone are worth an Oscar nomination as far as I'm concerned in terms of how this screenplay works. I think it really does work. And I think that the way the characters are revealed, explained, described through the movie is really very well done. It would be easy to make a movie like this with sort of voiceover narration to tell us what people are thinking and things like that. Personally, almost every movie with a voiceover narration, I find a reason to hate. Right? There's, film is meant to be a visual medium, and you can show rather than tell. And I think this movie does a good job of finding its spots for the characters to really reveal who they are. One of the other lines that just strikes me, and I don't think I have this one exactly, but I think it's after they've been to visit Majdanek, the concentration camp, and he said, and his David says about Benji, how did this guy come from the survivors of this place? How did the product of 1,000 miracles overdose on a bottle of sleeping pills? Again, I mean, an extraordinary example of the pain that they're all feeling, right? And everybody on this trip, it's on some levels starts to confront their own pain at the experience, and including the tour guide who gets his comeuppance a little bit from Benji, but really learns something. There's a great scene near the end of the movie when they're saying goodbye, right? When the tour guide is saying goodbye and he gives Benji a big hug and tells him how he's always asked people for feedback about the way he leads tours, and nobody has ever given him actionable advice before about what he can do, and he's really going to take it to heart, and it's really meaningful. And then he turns to David and says, "Bye, David." It's it really expresses the way the relationship between these two cousins works, right? And David, who is living so much inside himself and holding back, said, from a response, right, to his cousin, and Benji, who is, if you want to get Freudian about this script, I think you'd say, Benji is all id, and David is all superego, right? I mean, it's just holding it all inside, trying to be mature, trying to be the one who is strong and stands up, the stand-up guy. And Benji is all loose cannon. You never know what he's going to say or how he's going to react to what you say to him, right? So really very interesting all the way through. I love that the movie ends and begins in the same place, right? That JFK Airport is kind of this crossroads of the world. I mean, I just flew through there a few weeks ago on my way to Israel. And so this idea that, in this place of world migration, right? We think about Jews, the wandering Jew, right? And there he is, the rootless Jew. We don't even really know if he's got a home exactly, right? I guess he's been living in his mother's basement, So I guess that's where he's headed back to at the end of the movie, but that's not really clear. And he says the same line at the beginning of the movie as he says at the end about how he likes the airport. You meet the craziest people here. So it's, so very revealing kind of thing. But it's this sort of symbol of the wandering Jew, right? Comfortable anywhere, but not at home anywhere, right? So where are you less at home? Again, I had this experience in the airport in Amsterdam last week, waiting 30 hours to get on a flight because there was snow in Amsterdam. That we're all sort of like living at the airport for 24 hours and so trying to get comfortable but not really being at home for sure. So I think that's a part of it. And and then I'm interested in your take on all of this, but the movie in some ways doesn't have it certainly doesn't have a clear, happy ending. It has kind of an ambiguous ending or no ending at all, really. It's unfinished, the particular journey that they've made. They've accomplished what they set out to accomplish in a sense. They got to Poland, thanks to the bequest from their grandmother. They got to the house where she lived. They have a relatively, I would say, unsatisfactory experience in that moment, right? They come up with a Jewish ritual, right? They're going to put a stone on the step, and then they get admonished by the next door neighbors. There's an old lady who lives in that house now. She's going to trip on that rock if you put it there on the step. And so they pick up the rocks and take them with them instead. So, um, so the journey itself is over, but I don't think that there's any real catharsis on the pain that these two feel, right? And there isn't really a change per se in their relationship. I mean, at the end of the movie, David invites Benji to come over for dinner, and Benji turns him down, after sort of talking for 2 hours about how the only person who was ever really there for him was his grandmother. And now when David makes some kind of overture, which could maybe open a door, Benji turns it down, right? And then we also have the parallel. I mean, I think it's on top of the hotel near the end where Benji tells David the story about how his grandmother once slapped him, right? And how meaningful that was to him, right? It was, she called him on it, like you said, Sue. She didn't let him get away with the stuff he did. He was late to dinner, in her favorite restaurant where everyone knew who she was, and he showed up 15 minutes late, and he was high, and she slapped him, and he said it was the best thing she could have done for me. She proved how much she cared about me with that slap, that she cared about me more than she cared about the way people in the restaurant who knew her looked at her, right? So, not interested in what outsiders think, not interested in what the world thinks, only interested in her relationship with her grandson. And so that slap is really important and powerful. And then when Benji does it, I mean, when David does it to Benji in the airport near the end, it's a completely different kind of experience. I'm not sure that we can draw the inference from that moment that Benji now knows that David cares for him and the way that grandma cared for him. Maybe there's a hint of that there. Maybe you could read it differently than I do, but I think, uh, David immediately apologizes for doing it. Benji doesn't seem particularly changed by it. I think it's just, only some people in your life can do those things, right? And David is not one of them for Benji. So you end up with this unfinished ending. They go off their separate ways, and David goes home. He takes the stone out of the pocket, puts it on his own doorstep, right? So both of these young men are very loving of the legacy of their grandmother. It means a lot, I think, to both of them, but their connection to each other, I think, still remains very tenuous. And so if the grandmother had the intention that the two of them would become closer and that David would take sort of her place with Benji over time, I don't think we see that necessarily in the conclusion of the movie. So maybe they're leaving room for a sequel, when these guys are 20 years older. Maybe we'll see them again. I don't know, but I think that was not the intention. And I think there's something beautiful in the ambiguity and the unfinished nature of the ending, because I think life and relationships are kind of like that. They are rarely sewed up in neat little packages. And so I think it's a very well written and really beautiful, and I think acted very well. There's a part of me would like to see it with the actors switching roles and see what would happen if they played the opposite part. But they cast them in the way that these guys have usually been cast in the movies, and they did a beautiful job. So. So I'm interested in other people's thoughts. What did you think of it? And ring any bells for anybody? And what did you see? Yeah.
What I took out of the movie was, the, I found that the characters, we didn't get much of the background on Benji. We don't know why he ended up on his grandmother's couch. But I feel that all of this experience, he couldn't grow up. He just couldn't let go his younger years. And he was still living when he was a child, because he kept on saying to his cousin, remember when we did this and remember when we did that. And he just didn't grow up. And he ended up the same way he started, and that's how the movie started. He's in the airport because he's all alone, he can't find himself. And then he ends up in the airport, because that's how I took it, that he was all alone again.
Yeah.
He can't find himself.
Yeah, I think that's a very plausible reading. I mean, I guess I'm maybe a little more charitable to his character than that. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, he's not a grown up, but part of that is that he doesn't want to be a grown up, right? To him, being grown up means that you take your emotions and you hide them away, and you don't say what you really mean. And for him, that's not an acceptable way to live, right? And so, yeah,
But, you don't fit into society that well.
right. That's right.
It took a lot that wouldn't accept it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they even said it at the dinner, he's funny, and I think that's where David said that he tried to kill himself.
Yeah, it was at the dinner for sure. Yeah.
There was a problem, how his emotions were.
And there's this moment between the two of them near the end of the movie, I think that's up on the roof when they're smoking a joint together. And David tells Benji how much he wishes he could be like him, right? He says, don't you see how you light up a room? How can it be? You come into a room, you light up the room. He said, I love you and I hate you. I want to be you. Right. But then it finishes, and pardon me for the vulgarity of the lines, as you walk into him, light it up, and then shit all over it. Right. So, which is about right. That's a pretty good summation of the character. Yeah. So, and people are crazily attracted to him in a certain sense, and because he's someone who is in touch with emotion and lets it out and encourages other people to touch the very real pain, the very real emotion that they feel inside. So that's a really positive characteristic, So, but how do you harness that kind of behavior and that kind of energy into something that actually then is productive? Because I'd say some of our greatest artists are people who are very much in touch with that emotional thing, that emotional core, and they don't live conventional lives, and and yet they create, right? So Benji doesn't yet create so far,
Until he gets in touch with himself, and where he's going with his life.
right?
I mean, I really admire his ability to get in touch with people and get everybody going and doing things.
Yeah.
And making, he started getting everybody talking, and it was very social.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yeah. And of course, that's true of some of our most creative people too, is that they're hurting. You know, we hear that story a lot, right? There's a great example, I think, pretty early in the movie of how he gets people on his side, and you know, this moment in the hotel room when they first get into the hotel room, and David takes off his shoes and he says, um, you know, your feet remind me of grandma's feet. You know, it's really interesting. It's you know, and David says, of course I remember grandma's feet. And Benji says, I look at you and I see her. And David jokes, he says, I look like an old Jewish woman, right? But he says, you look wise, right? There's a real, you know, there's real ability, real wisdom, you know, real, you know, the character really does connect. And yet, where's he going, right? That's it.
Abby has a.
Yeah, Abby.
Yeah, I think to me the real pain is that the feeling cannot be in sync with everybody else. Everybody has their own pain, and it's like not tangible for everybody. On the other hand, I think that's also the benefit, because then you realize, okay, you can have your own feeling and it doesn't have to be like somebody else's, and at the same time appreciate the other person's feeling. I mean, I was going all over the place on that and had memories of when I first saw a grave of my grandmother, who was the only person who died a natural death in my extended family. And I was speechless. And the person that I was with said, "You don't have a reaction to this," and so on and so forth. And I did have a reaction and could not verbalize it. And I think to verbalize it sometimes lessens or cheapens your reaction. So I felt that was part of the pain. I could also, watching it, see, like what you were saying, just the nonverbal pain of a lot of the participants that I felt spoke, that spoke to me. And I, first there was that judgment, well, why is this person here? Why is that person there? And I thought, okay, that's that judgmental part of me. So I loved the movie, and your description, of course, makes it a little bit more bountiful as well. But I just felt, how do you describe pain, and how do you share pain, as well as how do you share joy sometimes?
Yeah. I think absolutely right. And that's if not a completely different way of looking at the title, but sort of turning it a little, right? That each member of the cast has their own pain, right? Each character. And in real life, each person has their pain, and articulating what that is out loud, is not an easy thing to do, and not necessarily a productive thing to do for you or for the other person, right? So we're always sort of gauging, what do we say and how do we say it? And certainly there are moments when we're simply struck dumb, right? Where the reaction is to not talk. There's a moment in the movie when they go to Majdanek, and the tour guide says, I'm not going to be my usual loquacious self. This place speaks for itself, right? And I think that's a powerful line in the movie, right? And then the movie itself takes its time going through Majdanek without much commentary, right? You might expect, certainly in something that was more like a documentary, explanations, how many people came through here, how many people were killed in these ovens, in this gas chamber, and things like that. And the movie resists, doing that, narrating it, right? And so we see it in many ways as if we had the same eyes, as if we were on the same tour as the rest of the group. And I think it's a very powerful moment in the movie that's really asking us as viewers to experience it, to feel it the way, the way Benji has talked to us. What is our pain when we see this thing?
Sue and then Sue Benjamin. Sue Ellen and Sue Benjamin.
This has been really interesting to hear what everybody had to say and what you said, Rabbi, because until today, I saw very little good about Benji.
No.
He was I found him so annoying. And so I've learned something today, and I thank everybody for that. But also, one of the things that really was how loud he was in public.
Yeah.
And on the airplane, he never lowered his voice.
Yeah.
He never talked softly so that other people couldn't hear him. And he didn't seem to care whether he was disturbing people with his loud talking all the time.
Yeah.
And if I were him, I would have been embarrassed.
Yeah.
For that. And I found that kind of revealing about the kind of person he was, that he really didn't care what anyone else thought. And he was gonna be himself.
Yeah, he is a walking contradiction in so many ways, right? You know, I mean, one of the scene on the train is my favorite example of that, I think, right? Where they start out in first class and he rebels. How can we be Jews on a train in Poland, you know, sitting in first class when our ancestors would have been herded in like cattle and sent to concentration camps? I get it. I mean, and I don't know, some of you on the call have probably visited places in Poland and Prague and things. And there is this sort of cognitive dissonance, I think, right? You know, you go see a concentration camp in the afternoon, then you go out for a beer in the evening. It's a very weird dissonance, you know? So I get that. And then they escape from first class. They go on the run, hiding out from the conductor and all this stuff, and end up back in first class, right? And this time Benji says, yeah, well, we've earned it. You know, so that's the kind of walking contradiction that he is, right? He's not really looking for a life, an ascetic life without creature comforts. You know, he's actually quite comfortable. He likes to eat, he likes to smoke, he likes to buys a weird little hat in the marketplace. You know, I mean, he's not reducing his pleasure, but he is this sort of walking contradiction all the time. Right? Sue Benjamin.
Well, hi everybody, and hi Rabbi, and welcome back. And I was wondering what you thought about this. The title, A Real Pain. There's so many different kinds of pain in this movie. But I was wondering, do you think the real pain is that neither of the main characters likes himself at all? That there's a lot of self-hatred there? Is that the real pain?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the real pain. It's definitely a real pain in this movie, right? I mean, I
Yes.
do think the movie intends for us to read it on all the different levels that we can find, right? You know, so starting with you know where Sue started us off, that Benji is a real pain.
He's a pain.
He's a pain in the neck, right? And the pain of the show on how that weighs on Jews in particular, right, in the world. But also, I think you're right. The pain we feel for not knowing ourselves, not being ourselves, you know, not liking ourselves.
Not liking ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not called a real pains, it's called a real pain.
Right.
So I was trying to think of what is the real pain
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
biggest pain or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So maybe the biggest, but you know, I don't. You know, human beings are complex, right? We have more than one pain.
It's
You
true.
know, and you know, we haven't even talked about, we have our aches and pains and we have that stuff too, right? But we have what's going on in our minds and our souls and you know, inherited trauma from generations past and the trauma we carry from our own lives, right? And so all of those things are different aspects of the pain that there is in being human. So it's not with pain completely without remedy, but it's not easy, right? And change for human beings is, I think this movie makes a pretty good case change at best is incremental, right?
Right.
A tiny little bit, a tiny little bit at a time, maybe. But some of these things are, trauma and things like that are so deeply embedded that even with years of therapy, I mean, it's hard to get through the, I doubt that you ever get past it, but getting through these things, is uh, uh, the work of a lifetime, right? And it, probably too much to expect 20 somethings, to be there. So, um, any other thoughts?
Neil says Jesse Eisenberg in real life applied for and received Polish citizenship.
Oh, yeah.
Joined after making this novel. I heard him interviewed last week by Molly John Fast, Howard Fast granddaughter, another Jew that did the same with Austrian citizenship. Any thoughts?
It's interesting. I think I didn't see that particular interview, Neil, but I think there are several reasons why Jews are asking for that citizenship, and a lot of governments in Europe are creating programs to make that possible for people. One of them is, I think, that we do have this sense that we were Polish once. I think they talk about that a little bit when they're walking through the towns. That kind of accidents of history. I think it said we'd be walking around here with big black fur hats on, right? If not for certain turns in their family's history. So I think there's a sense of sort of reclaiming something that is undeniably ours is one reason that people ask for that citizenship. I'm pretty sure that he's been quoted as saying that he wants people in Poland to have a better view of Jews than they've had in the past. And so as a successful Jew, I guess he wants to have Polish citizenship. So I'm not sure if that's a useful thing to do necessarily, but it's meaningful to him to do it. So why not, and other countries from Morocco to Spain to Portugal, are all have some level of citizenship programs for people to reclaim their citizenship.
Got reparations from Germany through his grandparents. And my grandchildren they're applying for German passports. And I think, and we're not gonna get into this, but I think it also has a little bit to do with the current politics in the United States.
Right. I think in knowing your family, I know that that's true. I'm not sure if that's what was going on here. So maybe, but I don't think this is his response to the American government. It's more connected to Polish Jewish history, I think. Anything about some of the ancillary characters that you want to mention? Anything about the tour guide or some of the other folks on the tour? I'm not sure I'm going to have the name, but the African gentleman who's converted to Judaism, I think is a very interesting character. Yeah.
Was he from Sudan?
Oh, he says he's from Rwanda and a survivor of the Rwandan genocide.
But he thought of Jews that were born Jewish, and he took on, and he's keeping the Shabbat. And I'm wondering how many of the characters in there kept Shabbat.
Yeah.
He was keeping it more. And I don't know if he could have related to what he could relate, but not as much as the Jews there, because in Rwanda they had the mass execution of their people.
Right.
So, but the one question I had, and I missed it, there was a married couple, and the husband's character, I could never figure that character out,
Mhm.
why he was on the tour.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't really say much about why he's on the tour. I mean, maybe he's just there along with his wife. I mean, let me see if I took any notes on what he says there as they go around. I think they are Jewish, but I don't have any notes actually of anything in particular that he said. They are there as tourists, you know, right? And I think my memory is that he says that his family came to America, in the early immigration. What does he say? They're Mayflower Jews, by which he means they came in 1900, I think, right? But that's his, so he doesn't really have the same level of anxiety, and pain about the Shoah because his family came over before that. So when Benji's telling everybody to feel their pain, he's kind of, I don't have this pain, right?
I just want to mention one thing. We were in Hungary years ago, and we went to Prague, and we went into the Jewish section in Prague.
Yeah.
When I was in Czechoslovakia. I know.
Yeah.
Well, we went to Hungary, but we were in Prague as well. We took the train to Prague, and we went to the cemetery.
Yeah.
And we saw the cemetery. The cemetery was very moving to me because it looked so much like this Polish cemetery.
Yeah.
It just been let go. No one takes care of it. And it was just a shame. And I felt something in the movie because I felt that way when we were in Prague.
Yeah. Yeah. How long ago were you in Prague? And
This was 20 years ago.
yeah. So you might be surprised by how the cemeteries look now. They've been cleaned up quite a bit, actually. So there's a lot more sort of attention being paid in a lot of these countries to the culture that came before. You see one example of it in the movie, I love this shot in the movie too, where the two of them are walking along, I think it's along the railroad tracks up above, and so it's in color, and down below there's a mural in black and white. And as you go along the mural, you get to part of the mural is about the Jewish experience in Poland, with Hebrew Yiddish characters on it and Jewish people in the mural. I like the way the screen is naturalistically cut in half between the color above and the black and white below. But it's an example of how all around Poland there's kind of a reclamation of the Jewish community and the Jewish community's experience, particularly prior to the war. There's a scene early on where they're standing in front of a statue, the first statue. There's a second one they stand in front of, two, or at least two. But the one they're standing, which is the tour guide says he likes to start his tours there. It's the memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. But where they're standing behind them, it's not mentioned, but there's a museum there now called Polin, which is the museum of the Jewish people of Poland from the 9th century to the present moment. So the fact that stands in Warsaw, it's an extraordinary museum, and not 20 years old. I'm not sure exactly when it opened, but it's much more recent. And that too is sort of part of this kind of reclamation of Jewish history that's going on. It was going on really full steam in Poland until a few years ago, and there's been a bit of a regime change and a backsliding in Poland over the last few years. But there were some really very positive things going on for a number of years there. And so the other statue that stands, again, it's an example of how Benji gets everybody involved and David doesn't, is I don't remember what this memorial is called, but it's a memorial about soldiers fighting, to free Poland, right? And he ends up getting the entire group, including the tour guide up. You know, the tour guide's pretending to be an airplane, and the guy from Africa is a medic, and Jennifer Grey, is that her name? Jennifer Grey's character is wants to hold a rifle, and Benji's left with David's left with everybody's cell phone. He's taking pictures, and the guide asks him something about, do you want me to take a picture? And he says, no, I got good pictures when nobody was there. So, yeah, I think really sort of describes a lot about character in this movie. So really well done. So the survivor of the genocide in Rwanda, I think, is a very interesting character, a bit of a conscience in the movie, and I do like the exchange that he has with David about David asks him if he's very observant, and he says, "Well, I'm not very observant, but I do love to observe the Shabbat every week, no matter how busy the week is, to have um, a, a, a day of rest, and it's very powerful and very important for him." And he says to David, "I think it would do a lot of good for you." And David says, you mean for people in general, or me particularly? And he says, you particularly, right? That wound too tight, right? So, and I love when he tells his story about surviving the genocide in Rwanda, and then he gets to America, he learns about the Jewish story. So I learned about the Jewish story and felt at peace for the first time, right? So it's a beautiful explanation for why he's become a Jew. So I think that these minor characters add certainly to the tapestry of the whole thing, and give us a little extra beauty in the screenplay. So
We're almost done.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about next week's film. One Big Happy Family.
No.
Okay.
No.
Is that on purpose?
Yeah. But I think you'll see why, I do try to put these movies into pairs. So I think I'm interested in how you would compare them once you see it. So One Big Happy Family.
Which one?
Can you pull it up?
Who's in it?
I'm gonna have to look it up myself.
Oh, Miami Jewish Fest.
That will be the one.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so you got it?
Yeah. That's the one for next week.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here. And well, we are on next week, right? Next Tuesday at this time. So and we'll continue doing it in this kind of hybrid form. So if you want to come in person, you're certainly welcome. If you want to stay online, that's also welcome. And look forward to seeing you. We do have a coffee with the clergy, I think, next week. Is that the same day? The 20th, from 2 to 3, probably. I think it's the same day. It's a week from today at 2. So if you come at 2 for coffee with the clergy, you can just stay and be here for this. Okay, so look forward to seeing you next week. Have a good week. Yeah.
Bye.